Johnson. I'm not the city manager, which means I do not have operational control over our city the way mayors do in other forms of government. Mostly what people refer to as strong mayor really means the mayor has operational control. The mayor hires and fires the head of sanitation. The mayor hires and fires the head of the Parks and Rec department. Not how it works here. But that doesn't mean that we have no control as elected officials or as the mayor over what happens in our city. It's albeit indirect and albeit not as robust. It does mean that as a council, and I'm a member of the council, that we have to do what we can to provide oversight and to provide resources to make sure that the things that need to happen in our city for our residents happen. And we also need to apply pressure to those that we've hired to run our city, like the city manager, to do those things. So what's the top priority of the city? In my opinion, and I know I'm not alone because I talk to plenty of people, as you might imagine, daily, and I have been for not just the past 2 years, but long before I was actually even the mayor, about what people care most about. And our top priority has to be public safety. There's just no way around it. We have to get a handle on the increases that we've been experiencing in violent crime in this city. Our police chief has a violent crime reduction plan that is going to have to stand or fall on its own merits. But we have to do what we can as policymakers to make sure that that plan is successful. And that means giving the police department the resources that it needs to execute this plan. We cannot have in this next budget cycle, and we really can't have ever again, at least on my watch, cuts to the public safety budget for the mere sake of cutting the public safety budget. I'm just going to, like I said, be very plain spoken about this. It's also true that we can't depend entirely on law enforcement to get our homicide numbers and our aggravated assault numbers turned around. During this upcoming fiscal year, we're going to have to continue to fund what some of you may have heard of, my mayor's task force on safe communities program and the Right Care program. We're going to need to put money into those. Those are non-law enforcement based approaches to public safety that have been shown where they've been implemented around the country to actually affect violent crime in a significant way. Long story short, on the Mayor's Task Force on Safe Communities, what that's really about is working with communities that are directly affected by violent crime to help them lower it through things like reducing blight and improving lighting, things that don't involve law enforcement per se, but actually have an impact on crime. The Right Care program is about making sure that we have the necessary mental health professionals to assist our law enforcement officers when they respond to certain types of calls that involve a mental health, someone who's struggling with mental health. And those are important too, because sometimes those situations become violent and it's not necessary. And so that's another good, smart thing to do. Sadly, and I say sadly because, I have to say, before I became mayor, I never would have thought this was an issue, but we have to properly staff our 911 call center. I've heard many stories, and I'm embarrassed to frankly say that it's more stories than the ninth largest city in the U.S. should have to hear, or the mayor of the ninth largest city in the U.S. should have to hear. But I've heard too many stories of people who call 911 in the city of Dallas and are home or can't get through at all. And I think that's unacceptable. And Renee, I think you need to go on mute because I think we're picking up the conversation. But yeah, that's unacceptable to me, that someone would call 911 in the city of Dallas and be put on hold or not be able to get through at all. Answering a 911 call is, to me, the most basic level of service that a city provides. And if we can't do that well, then we might as well close up shop, because frankly, nothing else we do is going to matter. I mean, you've got to be able to do that well. We've fallen short on our streets. And since most people on this call are in some way associated with East Dallas, you know well what I'm talking about. we're currently underfunding our infrastructure in this city to the tune of $50 million a year. And we can't keep doing that and expect to compete with our suburbs. And that's something that you may have heard me talk about before. Is the mayor a regionalist or is he an anti-regionalist? And really what that debate's about, and I'll just try to be as quick as I can about that, is it's a little bit oversimplified. The North Texas region is the fourth largest region in metro region in the United States. It's very vibrant, but Dallas is at the heart of it. And we can't continue to ignore the fact that although the region is growing pretty rapidly, it's largely our surrounding suburbs that are driving that growth, not the city of Dallas itself. The city of Dallas has got to take seriously competing with the Planos and the Friscos of the world for residents to help share the tax burden and for businesses to invest in our city so that we have the jobs and we have the tax base so that we can get our taxes moving in the right direction. And the right direction, for those who don't know, means lower. So that's what we're looking for. To that end, I say we also need to get our sanitation services in order. Again, people should not be sitting at their homes wondering when the trash truck is going to come by or if the trash truck is going to come by and pick up their garbage or their bulky trash. But that's happening, and it's happening far too often. And so we've got to get that under control. We've got to fix our broken permitting process in this city. We need our permitting office to work well so that our city can grow. If we lose out on development, continue to lose, I shouldn't say start, it's already happening, but if we continue to lose out on development opportunities to our suburbs, your property taxes, for those of you who call Dallas home, will never go down, period. It will be mathematically impossible to do it. And I'm sad to report, but it's already the case that you're paying the highest property tax rate among any major city in the region or any major city in the state, actually. So that's an issue. That's a competitiveness issue. Now, move to part two of the agenda that I have is the build for the future part of my agenda. So we have the back to basics part, which is those things I just said, that those cracks in the foundation. The build for the future agenda is about setting Dallas up for future success for our kids and our grandkids. So there's a great city that we leave behind. These are the kinds of issues that basically I ran for mayor on, but we were making a lot of progress, on those issues, but the pandemic happened, and then some tornadoes happened and winter storms happened that caused power outages, and so we've had civil unrest in the city. These are the types of things that had to take a back seat to actually saving lives. But this is the stuff I ran for mayor on, and that we've got to really get serious about in the next 2 years to keep us on pace. At the top of that list, I'd say are workforce issues, ensuring that our workforce is prepared for the jobs of the 21st century. And we're actually working on that right now. I just announced not too long ago a workforce study that is being funded for us by the Bloomberg Philanthropic Organization. They're going to be making some concrete recommendations for how we can help retrain and retool our workforce here in Dallas to be able to compete in this changing economy. Our city cannot continue to think of itself as just one big real estate play. Where are the investments in real estate going to happen? Real estate's very important, don't get me wrong, but we have to invest in the people in this city. We have to take people who live in parts of our city that have been historically underinvested in. So that's, Southern Dallas, large parts of East Dallas, West Dallas, where I grew up, and give them the opportunities that they need to become successful. So it's not just about whether or not we're going to put, a Starbucks somewhere. Starbucks equity is not the problem. It's whether or not we're going to actually invest in the skills of folks who live in these communities, so they can actually, command the kind of wages that would demand the type of development that we want. In that vein, we're working on growing and improving a program called Dallas Works, which is our city's summer jobs program. It's how we hire a lot of the young people in our city who are in high school to try to get them started in the world of work. It started under Mayor Tom Leppert. It was a very small program, and I'm trying to grow it to be a program that employs thousands, not hundreds, but thousands of our kids in this city. And that can definitely be done. Houston's goal for their hiring, to put it in perspective, of young people through their summer jobs program is about 10,000 kids. Louisville, Kentucky, Boston, other cities have programs in the thousands. And these are cities that are much smaller, not Houston. Houston's bigger than Dallas, but Boston, Louisville, that are doing 10,000, they're doing thousands of kids, considerably smaller cities than Dallas. So we've got some work to do there, but we're doing it. We also need to fully implement the recommendations of my task force on innovation and entrepreneurship, which just released their report this week, this past week rather, on how we can become a more inclusive and a nationally recognized hub for startups. We just announced that we're going to be including the findings of this report in our city's comprehensive economic development policy, which we should be approving very soon. Another part of that economic development policy that I want to mention that I think will be of interest to many of you on this call, that's new for Dallas. We've not had this before, and it's critical, is that we are going to create, hopefully, assuming the city council approves this, a new economic development entity that focuses exclusively on promoting and growing the city of Dallas. So again, I think I mentioned this a little bit before, that some of you may have heard about all this growth that's happening in the region. But the reality is that it's not really being driven by the city of Dallas in terms of the population growth. And that worries me. And it means that we can't keep doing everything the way we've been doing it. If we want people to invest in the city of Dallas and to call the city of Dallas home, we've got to start acting like the economic engine of the nation's fourth largest metro area, which is what we are. So we've got to actually do something to promote Dallas, frankly, exclusively. We've got a regional chamber that focuses on the region, and that's their mission. And I get that. But so that means we can't rely on them exclusively to push Dallas. It also means we can't expect groups like yours or the North Dallas Chamber to do it on your own. It's a big ask. It's a big lift. So this entity is going to help you. This entity is going to be Dallas-centric, Dallas-focused, and its goal is to make sure that when we are pitching corporate relocations and we're pitching investment in our city, we mean the city of Dallas, the actual city limits. We want that to happen in our city. In a similar vein, I think we have to be bigger players than we have been on the international stage. You may have seen in the news recently that I've resumed taking meetings with high-level diplomats at City Hall again. So it's meant to be a very symbolic gesture to let the world know that Dallas is coming out of this pandemic stronger than we went in. That's our goal, is to make sure that the world knows that we are open and that we want to take our rightful place we're going to try to increase the number of trade offices that are here, as opposed to the majority of our diplomatic presence in the state of Texas. Foreign diplomats are concentrated in Houston, but Dallas has a strong case to make for why it should be here. We are the economic heart of the state of Texas, and we have an incredible airport in DFW and Love Field, but an incredible international gateway in DFW that rivals the Port of Houston for generating economic activity. And we need to lean into this and not be squeamish about saying Dallas is an international city. And Dallas wants to be in the conversation with London and Paris and New York and San Francisco and Miami and the coastal cities for being a place that people think of when they think of the United States. So it's my personal opinion that Dallas has too many assets and too much potential to be a mere bystander when it comes to international commerce and diplomacy. I want to see some of our trading partners open trade offices, if they're not going to move their consulates to Dallas, which is more of where the international protocol work happens, the foreign policy from a diplomacy standpoint happens. trade offices where we're talking about international commerce and increasing foreign direct investment and trying to encourage foreign companies to open an American headquarters in Dallas. So, you think about something like a Sony, or something like that, a well-known Japanese company. Dallas should be in the conversation for where their American operations should be headquartered. Toyota wants to have an American headquarters. They should be picking Dallas. These companies that are looking to expand into American markets should be looking at a city that is, equidistant to both coasts, with a world-class, top 5 world-class airport and a #1 in the world people, if you ask me. So we need to be in that conversation, and we have not been to the extent that we could be. Finally, building for the future to me means implementing our comprehensive environmental and climate action plan so that we ensure that Dallas is a resilient city for years to come. No matter where you are politically on this issue of climate change and what the cause of it is, I kind of don't care. I'm not trying to get into that debate with you. Here's what matters. The climate's changing, no matter what the source of it is, and we're feeling the impacts of it, right? Like we just saw the winter storms, flash flooding and things like that. We just have to be prepared. I mean, you don't have to agree on the reasons it's happening. It's happening with greater frequency, and we need to be ready. So while we don't control the power grid in this state, we need to be a city that's prepared to deal with incidents like those terrible winter storms and power outages that we experienced back in February. There are other issues, of course, and I'm happy to talk about those with you guys in the course of our Q&A, but I want you to know that I'm incredibly excited to see what we're going to be able to do over the next 2 years as we come out of this pandemic. I think people are ready. People are ready to take off these masks and get back out there again, doing what we folks who are in private enterprise do, which is provide goods and services that people want and need to have a full life. So I'm very excited about it. I think we have 2 years left in my first term to really lay that groundwork for a brighter and stronger city, and I think we're going to do that. So with that, Renee, I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Johnson, for going through all of that. Sounds like you've got some amazing plans and things in the works, and we are equally as excited about getting past, this COVID piece and getting on with getting things back in order and getting things restarted and regenerating that desire that we have as a city to continue to move forward. We do have a couple of questions that have been posed. Number one, with the current American Rescue Plan passed by our current administration, how much does Dallas plan to gain, and what do you plan to focus on with those funds specifically?
Okay, so we just received the guidance from Treasury about how much we're going to get and what we're able to spend it on. So no decisions have been made yet about exactly what we're going to spend it on. And as I sort of alluded to before about how city government works here in Dallas, it's not my unilateral decision. Anyway, certainly I'm a voice, and I have opinions, which I'm going to share with you about how I'd like to see it spent. But just want everybody to understand that it's our budget process in the city of Dallas is one where the budget originates with the city manager. He puts forward a budget, and then the council reacts to it through amendments to it. I'm able to offer amendments, but other council members are able to offer amendments too. And so we'll see where we end up. But the dollar amount we're talking about is $177 million for this fiscal year. That's the number that Treasury, we finally have gotten clarity on. That's the amount. And we got some more guidance on what's eligible, what's not eligible, but the final decision about how we're going to spend it here is yet to be determined. What we know is that it's intended to replace pandemic-related lost revenue. When I say pandemic-related, I mean pretty much any lost revenue is probably attributable to the pandemic at this point. But the point is it's able to be your budget. You're able to use it to plug holes in your budget, which was not the case necessarily. It had to be pretty creative about how you did that under the original, aid package that we got during the last administration. So this administration wanted to make sure cities had a lot more flexibility in how they use that money. My recommendation is this, is a philosophical matter, because we're going to have these discussions in earnest as a council once we see the city manager's budget. I want to see us use it to fix the foundation. I want to make sure that the money, to the extent possible, goes to making sure that the basics of city government work for you the way they need to, so that you don't leave. And so you feel like you're getting good value for your tax dollars. And to me, what that means, another way of looking at that is, we need to not look at this sort of, I won't call it a gift from the federal government, because we contribute to it in our federal income taxes, but it's money sent to us from the federal government for this one time. We don't need to create a bunch of multi-year obligations or recurring obligations because we got some one-time money. We still need to be very disciplined about what we do with this money. And so I don't want us to view this as some sort of bailout, and where we're going to be able to, sort of become more fiscally irresponsible because of it. I think we need to be looking at places where we lost revenue because of decreased user fees, or things we weren't able to do because of the pandemic, and shoring up those services. And so what those exactly are is a council discussion, but I don't want us creating a bunch of new programs. I'll just say that. We don't need to be creating a bunch of new programs going into a bunch of areas that we weren't in before. We need to make sure we're able to do those things that I kind of talked about during the first 20 minutes or so of our visit today.
Great, and you did talk about a lot of those in the first 20 minutes, so thank you very much for that. Next, let's talk a little bit about police officers and how much money is available for them, and what the status of maybe hiring additional help on the force looks like from the mayor's perspective, of course.
So you said police officers and
police officers, yeah.
Kind of where we are on that.
Where we are and how much money is available. We're gonna see more of them coming in. What's going on?
Right. Okay. So this is actually a great question. I appreciate it, because I talked about it so much after the last budget. It was such a topic of the current council election cycle. And I think people need to understand, kind of where we are, like you asked, and really what's what here. So I'm here to do straight talk. And so I'm going to make sure you understand the facts of public safety from the perspective of a city government. So I think you've heard me say this. It's a baseline premise of mine that it is our fundamental duty as city government to provide public safety for our residents. It's not a luxury, having your 911 calls answered and not being put on hold, or not being, disconnected before you've reached someone, and having the police respond to violent crime and all those types of things. To me, that's not a luxury. That's not like, oh, that's nice to have. That's fundamental. And so that's why I say it's priority number one. And our budget needs to reflect that. When I became mayor 2 years ago, to give you a little bit of background on this and kind of how we got to where we are, everyone I got elected with and the entire council agreed with that premise. And we had a 15-0 vote on a budget that was described publicly by everyone on the council and the city manager as a public safety budget. And what we meant by that was, we were going to start to right some of the past wrongs of prior administrations and councils that had allowed our police department to dwindle due to employee benefits related issues surrounding the pension and compensation issues. Our starting pay was too low. Our increases weren't sufficient on the pay scale. We weren't marking our salaries to market to make sure at all times our salaries were competitive with our neighbors, and we were paying the price. We were having people go through our police academy, get trained in big city policing at our expense, and then leaving to go to police in Mesquite or Garland. or University Park or Addison or wherever. And it was a problem. And everybody agreed that what we needed to do was to start marking our salaries to market. And we needed to, work on our pension issues and some other things. We had a vote that was 15-0 in 2019 to do the salary things I just discussed. Fast forward to the last budget that the last budget cycle we just had. And I don't know, it was the same council, it was the same mayor, but what you had was a bunch of amendments that started taking resources away from the police department, some of them being resources we had just agreed to put in the prior budget, right in the middle of a violent crime spike, which was just unacceptable to me and to a minority, unfortunately, of the council. I wasn't alone, but it was not a majority of the council that felt like we should continue our commitment to public safety by honoring that mark-to-market provision. So we did not mark our salaries to market, and we put in place a budget that actually budgeted for the police department to shrink by 111 officers. So we actually voted, I didn't vote for, and a minority did vote for, but the council approved a budget that shrank the police department in the middle of a violent crime spike. That same budget also included a 25% reduction to the police overtime budget. That's a fact. And so so let me give you how that's turned out, how that's played out. Here are the facts about the police overtime budget cut. Overtime is not a luxury either. Overtime is a tool that a police department that's understaffed must use to create the manpower to generate public safety. If you don't have the officers, you have to take the officers you have and make them work longer hours. That's just how that works. So overtime is what you have to do if you're not going to do the officer hiring thing. Well, we put it in a budget that said we're not going to do the officer hiring thing, and we're also going to send a message to whomever and cut this overtime budget by 25%. Here's the latest on that. We've already blown through the entire overtime budget that the council approved. The reduced budget was blown through by the beginning of this month. We're already $1 million over that budget, and we're projected to go over that budget by $10 to $15 million. That's a pretty ridiculous and totally foreseeable budget bust. And that I don't do budget busts. I'm not here to make statements. I'm here to try to provide services to our residents. So I was adamantly opposed, and still am, to any approach to public safety that for just the sake of saying you cut something that you know you're going to need. So now here we are. We're going to have to go and find an additional $10 to $15 million somewhere. And it's going to be up to the council to determine how we do it. Those decisions were not that was not what I would call putting public safety first. It was not honoring it as our top priority as we had done just a year before. The vote on that budget was very split. I think based on what I heard on the campaign trail and what I've been seeing, it's my impression that nobody ran this cycle on wanting to double down on what they did last time. It seems to me that everyone has figured out that we should not have taken that approach and that we're not going to take that approach again. So I'm hopeful that in this coming up budget, which we're about to enter into right now, the budget season, that we will adequately fund police overtime and that we will get back to marking our salaries to market so we can recruit officers. Because at this point, final update, I told you we had planned on over 2 years for the police ranks to shrink by 111 officers, or 110 officers, excuse me. Here's where we are right now in the current fiscal year. We've had 111 officers leave the department so far this year alone, 1 year, 111 leave. We've hired 68, but they have to go through the police academy. So you don't just hire 68 officers and then they start working and start policing the streets and making arrests. They got to go through an academy. And then the plan was, according to the budget that called for cutting the overtime by 25%, was also to then civilianize 95 positions, which would then be able to free them up to put them on the street. Well, my argument then, my argument now, my argument will forever be, you can't civilianize that many positions that quickly. So that was never going to offset the loss of officers. And true enough, that's proven to be true as well. We've only civilianized about 40 positions, 40 or so. So 7 months into a 12-year fiscal year, we're not on pace to civilianize 95 positions. We've got people going through the academy, but even if you added those two together, if you literally added, if you pretended like every officer you put through the academy was ready to go today, and you add it to what we've been able to civilianize, you still haven't offset the attrition in the department. So on net, we have fewer officers in the Dallas Police Department than when we started the year. And that's where we're going to be unless we change our tune on this. And so those are the facts, and they're unassailable, and they're available for public consumption. But that's where we are. That's the full public safety situation.
Well, that net off the attrition is going to be a little bit of a challenge, I see. So, yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. We are limited to time. We're 1 minute past. I'm going to make it, you can get some real quick here, but of all the issues, in 28 seconds, which is the hardest to solve and what's needed to help get you there. And I'm going to, as you answer that, I'm also going to set you off here by saying we are very supportive of you. We're very grateful to have you in East Dallas with us. Thank you for all you do for us. We've got projects like 635 East and Garland, Gaston, and Grand that we won't even touch. But we know that we're going to need a lot of help with those. And if there's any other specific actions or activities that we can do as a chamber, we want to keep those at the forefront. And so those vital projects moving forward is what we all need. And we're here to support you as part of our Chamber of Commerce. So in 28 seconds, what's the hardest to solve and what do we need to do to get it?
Well, first, you have my unwavering support. I love East Dallas. I love my neighborhood. I love Forest Hill. We love East Dallas as a whole. My wife and kids and I aren't going anywhere. Like, we are here. We have found our home, and East Dallas is everything to us. So 100% got your back on all of that. The hardest problem to solve is public safety. And the reason why it's so hard to solve is because there's so many variables and factors that play into violent crime. And you need so many people to do things the right way to move the needle on it. So even if you have the law enforcement piece right, like the actual right violent crime strategy, if you're not doing the right things in the community in terms of addressing it from the side of, what contributes to crime that has nothing to do with responding to crime or deterring it by police presence, but has to do with access to resources, education, those types of things, then it's a very difficult thing. So crime is a hard problem to solve because it requires a lot of people doing the right thing for a protracted period of time. Any more questions? I'm gonna get through them as fast as I can. What else you got? Can you hear me? I think we're frozen.
It looks like Renee may be having some issues with his microphone here.
Jump in, Brad. Ask me a question or something. Do you need rapid fire?
The only other topic that I saw come across was I don't know. It's if you have.
I have no idea why you're so handsome. Is that what you're going to ask me? I have no idea.
We all have our cross to carry, right? So. The only other question I saw come across that someone was asking about was homelessness. Do you have any quick thoughts on the homeless situation, how we can kind of address that, the needs of those?
I'm going to rapid fire that one too.
Sure.
Numbers are ticking up, and we expected that coming out of a pandemic, that we'd have some pandemic related increases in that. We just announced yesterday that the federal government, the Biden administration, has just given us about 600 or so vouchers to help us address homelessness, related to the pandemic. Folks who are on the verge of becoming homeless or who are experiencing homelessness right now, who we need to house. And so that's going to be a great partnership between us, Dallas Housing Authority, the Real Estate Council, the Apartment Association of Greater Dallas, and folks who are in the private rental market to help us get some folks housed. But in the longer term, I'd say we've got an equity issue to address when it comes to homelessness. The reality is, and look, we're digging into why this is and how it relates to how to solve it. But 55% of our homeless in this city are African American. African Americans only make up 24% of the city. So there's something going on there that's not quite right, and we got to get to the bottom of that. It's a really disproportionate impact on a particular demographic, and I think figuring that out is part of the key to solving homelessness in our city. It's a very unique mix of homeless that we have in Dallas. It's not quite normal, actually.
The only other thing, sorry, I don't know what happened there, technical difficulties. What can we do on the permitting process? What are we going to see, if any, changes to that? That's going to affect us a lot.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. It's a big problem. And I think the city manager is starting to hear from everyone that this is not an area that is going to be acceptable to just say, hey, we're trying. We're losing real tax base every day that someone decides to do a project in another city around us because they don't want to deal with the Dallas permitting process. And for those of you who don't live, eat, and breathe permitting, you got to understand what we're talking about. We're talking about everything from someone who wants to, build a major structure to someone who, like the folks who just, God, I feel so bad for these folks who just had their house hit for a second time by another tornado. You know what? They're going to have to go through our really not very good permitting process to get that work done on their house. And that's terrible. We've got to do better on that. And the city manager is hearing that from me. It's hearing it from all the council. And I'll just lay it out here this way. We've got to do this the way any one of your businesses would do it. We have a city manager whose job it is to get that office working. If he can't get that office working, then we've got to talk about who can. We got to talk about who can. I can't get involved in the day-to-day operations of the city because that's not the way our charter works, and neither can the council. So your council people can't do this. This is something our city manager just has to do, period, full stop. He has to get that done.
Well, it seems to come up over and over again, and then and the process doesn't seem to change any. And when it does, it only seems to change more in the negative than it does in the positive. And that's, again, detracting from businesses that are going to help that tax base that we're all after. And that I feel like that is one of our very, very large challenges. Especially in our East Dallas area where we're trying to grow and keep people. We are a very community-friendly type of area. And we see folks going out to other places because we can't attract those businesses that want to be here because of our permitting process. And I know that we're working on it, but we've got to streamline that. Yeah,
this is a uniquely Dallas problem too. Like a lot of times, folks in city government will try to say it's this is part of a glut that everyone's facing, or whatever. Well, here's the reality. No matter how you want to look at it, you can either look at us regionally and say, well, how are the other cities in our area affected, irrespective of size, or you can just compare us to cities around the state that are our size, but maybe not in our region. Either way, by either comparison, and I'm happy to share the numbers with you guys after this call, no matter how you want to compare us, we're doing not very well. I mean, Austin is just blowing the doors off on getting these people permitted, but so are our neighbors that are, near us, but smaller. So Houston is doing a better job. I mean, everyone's doing a better job that we consider a competitor.
Prosper's on fire.
So it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. And I wish I were able to get more operational about that, but I can't. But we got to do our job and oversee the folks that we've hired to get this working.
Well, thank you again, Mayor, very much for your time. Your Mayor's Task Force on Innovation and Entrepreneurship is something that's really exciting and up and coming, and we're really looking forward to following through those steps and processes and watching as that grows. It's going to be a great benefit to us. So thanks for that initiative.
They made several recommendations, but the two I'd point out to that I think are the coolest that you guys should be on the lookout for, because these are really cutting edge ideas. We're going to have an entrepreneur in residence and a venture capitalist in residence at City Hall to help City Hall learn how to speak the language of venture capital and entrepreneurship, so we can actually be helpful. Because let's be honest, government folks don't know about starting businesses from the ground up. Government folks don't know about venture capital and what people are looking for when they're talking about investing in these early stage startups. So we're going to do that, and we're going to create a fund of funds that's not at the city, but in the private sector that is, the city's going to support it, but we're going to actually create a fund of funds to get real capital moving from within our city that already exists in some of these corporations, some of these family offices that are over there at Old Parkland and other places where you got people looking to deploy capital, but they're looking all over the country and all over the world. They're not looking right here. we're going to try to marry some of that local capital that's looking for investments with our local startup community. So we're going to create this fund capital flow. It's great.
Who gets invited to those?
Who gets invited to join the fund of funds?
Yeah.
Anybody who I think, you know, on the who has capital to deploy, who's interested in being connected with anyone in our local startup ecosystem. So we can talk after this call about how we anticipate that working, but that's a very exciting thing. That's real money flowing to our startups.
That is a great. That's exciting stuff. And we're getting a lot of stuff here in the chat about how thankful we are again for your time. And it's been a great meeting. And as always, we appreciate having you. We tried to do a little research on this. I think this goes back to at least 2013 that we've had yearly a mayoral luncheon. So we're grateful as a chamber. We're thankful to you, sir.
I'm grateful to be invited. You got any more questions? I got 9 more minutes. What else you got? Anything? You good?
All right. Well, you know, since we're in D14 here, what are your thoughts on short-term rentals?
Short-term rentals.
Top of the list on there.
We are hearing a lot about short-term rentals, and D14 has more than anybody.
Yes.
More than any district, and I think the district I live in, D9, is got quite a few too. So look, here's the deal on short-term rentals. I just added to the agenda on our May 5th meeting that we just had a public hearing to hear from folks about this, and we got a lot of people. I feel like maybe 100 or so people virtually participated in that hearing to share their ideas about it. Here's where I am personally in terms of how I think about it. Although we don't have a policy yet, we're working on one. That's why we want to get the input. I love my neighborhood. I love Forest Hills. One of the things we love most about it is the quiet enjoyment of our private property, right? So I respect every property owner's right to quiet enjoyment. Something all the lawyers on the call are thinking about, having flashbacks to property law right now, because quiet enjoyment is built into your property right. I get that. But also, I respect people's property rights to use their property in ways that don't infringe on others' rights, but that, benefit them financially. And so I'm a very jealous, protector of people's private property rights. And I've enjoyed short-term rentals when I've traveled. I think there's a way that those can work into a local economy that are beneficial to the local economy and allow people to enjoy your community and your city in ways they otherwise wouldn't. I mean, there are people who would come and stay in a short-term rental that would not necessarily come and stay at one of your hotels. And I think there's a role they can play, but we've got to figure out a policy that achieves that balance between not being a nuisance, but not overly restricting people's private property rights. So I know the Quality of Life Committee is taking up this issue. We're going to have to look at it as a full council and come up with a policy. But just know that me personally, I don't want to live next to a party house, and I sympathize with anybody who's currently enduring that. I would not want that, and we need to figure out a way to make that not possible. But I don't think we need to take what should be approached with a scalpel and approach it with an axe. I think we need to be a little more. We need to be really intelligent about how we do this. We don't want to be known as a city that is not able to come up with an elegant solution to a complex problem. And I think
got to be methodical on that. This is an interesting question that we got from the floor here. What would it take for the mayor of Dallas to have normal control of our city?
I missed that. You froze up on me.
What would it take for the mayor of Dallas to have normal control of our city? So I guess that means like not being a strong mayor as opposed to strong city manager.
Right. The answer to that factually, I mean, just as a matter of fact, is it would require the residents of Dallas, actually more than a resident, you'd have to be a qualified voter in the city of Dallas to vote on a ballot initiative that presented that question to the voters about what they would change about the city charter and the mayor's role versus the council's role versus the city manager's role. All the things that we've been talking about in terms of what I can and can't do, what the council can and can't do, what the city manager can and can't do, are spelled out in the charter. The charter is the constitution, if you will, for the city. And anything you want to do to change that arrangement has to go to the voters for their approval. So there are different ways you can get that to the voters. One is a vote of the council to send it to the voters. And the other is through collecting signatures and sort of forcing the issue. But either way, those changes cannot be made without the approval of the qualified voters of the city of Dallas in a
Is that
simple
something
majority.
that's ever come up before?
Oh, it's come up numerous times in our city's history since we've
Yeah.
had this system. Always unsuccessfully for different reasons and whatnot. But yes, it has been attempted before to change it in that sense, yes.
Last one, future build plans in relation to the partnership that you mentioned with Bloomberg Philanthropies to figure out the best possible workforce development model. Any specifics, a little bit more, detailed on that?
We'll have a plan from the Bloomberg funded study in September. And what Bloomberg is known for and why we were happy to partner with them is they deliver on concrete actions. They don't give you fluff reports. They will tell you, or they fund organizations who are in the business of telling you, what your problem is and, kind of what your landscape looks like and what they recommend. So here's the thing about Dallas and when it comes to workforce up to now. It's a word that's been thrown around a lot. A lot of people care about it. A lot of people are working hard on it, but we don't have the level of cooperation that we probably need to move the needle, nor do we really have a true grasp, full grasp of exactly what the needs are and where they are. And so that's what this study is supposed to do. It's supposed to give us the roadmap. It's supposed to tell us, hey, these are the areas that are growing that we think are future-proof industries. This is where your current workforce stands in relation to those jobs in terms of unpreparedness. And here's how your current ecosystem of providers, your community college, your school district, your nonprofits that care about this, your local governments that are all doing something in this workforce area can work better together. This entity is doing this very well and they need to do more of it. This entity is trying really hard, but is not ideally suited for it. They'd be better deployed elsewhere doing something else. They're just going to tell you the truth because frankly, they're not part of this community. And so they're not going to have to deal with sort of any hurt feelings that come out of it. They're just going to tell you the truth, which is why I wanted them to look at it because I want to know the truth. And so we can actually move the needle on this because really, honestly, the future of the city is really at stake on this. If we're going to really compete in the future with the Austins and lately Miami's been making a strong push. And I mean, if you can believe this, because of city leadership, Miami, which is a beautiful town. I mean, I love it, but I mean, it's not the most convenient place to get to from like the Pacific Northwest or from a lot of places in this country. For them to get more in the conversation about, the future than we are in some ways is wrong. Like that's not okay. Dallas is perfectly situated in this country to take advantage of a ton of opportunities. Our workforce is a big part of that story that we have to tell. We got to explain to people that you can get in and out of this place anywhere in the world very easily. And this workforce here is perfectly suited for the jobs that you need filled. So we got to get this right. We have to get this right. Or there's another direction the city could go, which is, the Rust Belt. I mean, that's a real possibility. If Dallas doesn't get these things right, these foundational things right, there's the direction of Detroit and, the Midwest that we could go where, you're just not ideally suited for the new economy. Great people, but just not set up for success in the future. That's what happened to Detroit. We don't want to be that.
Well, I'm going to use your analogy then. I appreciate that you're using a structural engineer and not a foundation company to repair our foundation.
That's exactly right.
All right. Well, we've taken every single but 1 minute on our time here.
Shoot,
again,
go for it. Get one more in.
being
Squeeze one more in if you want. I'm not trying to make you ask questions. It's okay. So make sure you get your money's worth, especially since my wife's on the board. I mean,
Well, we appreciate that very, very much. And we've got a great, strong board. And I think that we all want, so many of the same things. So thanks again, Brad. Take us home.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you again, Mayor Johnson. We really appreciate your time.
You got it.
All right.